These newspaper article readings are not for the faint-hearted or the squeamish. If you're at all sensitive, I might suggest these aren't for you. If in doubt, check the description below. It'll tell you which topics are covered in this particular episode. There's both human and animal suicides, and you heard that right. There's also horrific descriptions of injuries, as well as the deaths of youngsters. So don't do it to yourself if you're prone to nightmares, is all I'll say right now. Not all the articles are horrible. Some of them are uplifting, some of them show incredible bravery and heroism. There are near misses. So these were picked as showing life prior to health and safety, as well as for the crazy and curious details some contain, with other miscellaneous happenings that kind of struck me enough to post the articles to Twitter, despite not having too much relevance to Scotland necessarily. These are worldwide topics, and they didn't have any real connection to the projects I was working on and researching at the time. I just happened to have come across them by the way, kind of thing. So we'll get into them, shall we? What we're going to do here is we're going to do a lucky dip of newspaper articles to really mix them up a wee bit, because while I'm doing the researches, I'm obviously coming up with the same kind of terms and things. So we'll mix them up even further. So to that end, I have all of the newspaper titles and dates of the articles. Let's see what the hat has for us today, shall we? We're starting with the Scotsman for the 24th of October 1904. Let's see what the Scotsman has for us. Okay, for this article you need to know who Jenny Geddes was. Now, Christians were Catholic. Catholic, the word Catholic just means universal. It was seen as the universal religion. It wasn't, but you know. It's good marketing, I suppose. So, at the Reformation, Protestantism really came about, and what it was it was a rebellion against the pomp and circumstance of the Catholic Church. That Jesus was a poor man and was an advocate for the poor, and therefore for churches to be places of making money seemed to be in a contradiction to itself. So Protestants come out. Then in the 17th century, Charles I comes to the throne of Britain, and he's James VI's son. James VI being the Scottish king, but James VI had some very funny ideas. He was a little bit of an extremist in his views, you know, the whole witchcraft thing, is demonology and that. But Charles I was a little too Catholic in his ways, which the people of Scotland especially were not fans of. Scotland had really taken to Presbyterianism, which was quite a strict form of Protestantism, I suppose. So when Charles I comes to the throne, he introduces something called the Common Book of Prayer, and I think these were quite happily used in English churches, but I think it was 1637, he tried to have it used in Scottish churches. And in St Giles Church, which was a main church in Edinburgh, the main church in Edinburgh, was the priest had got up to read from this common book of prayer, or had begun to read from this common book of prayer at some point during a sermon, and Jenny Geddes reportedly picked up her stool, because this was a time when you paid for your church seats, or you brought your own stool with you. She launched her stool at the priest's head because she was so against the use, as were a huge proportion of Scotland, against the use of this common book of prayer as being a little too close to Catholicism. So, in saying that, we have this article from the Scotsman. An Inverurie Jenny Geddes. An incident of a rather extraordinary nature occurred in the parish church of Inverurie yesterday, towards the close of the morning service. The Reverend Mr. Black, minister of the church, had just concluded his sermon and given out a paraphrase to be sung, when an elderly lady was seen to rise from her pew under the gallery on the north side of the church, walk hurriedly along the passage, and make her exit, slamming the door behind her. The congregation had just risen to sing, when the woman was seen to re-enter the church. She was in a very excited state, and it was quite obvious that she was suffering from some temporary mental derangement. Rushing back to her pew, the woman forced her way past the other occupants, seized 3 books, 2 of them being Bibles of considerable size. With the largest of the Bibles, she took aim at the pulpit, evidently with the intention of striking the minister. She missed, however, and the book struck an old lady a few yards distant. The first few words of the paraphrase had just been sung, when the woman walked boldly and in an excited manner up the aisle, and on arriving at the choir platform, she flung another book at the minister, but, fortunately, she again missed her mark, the book striking the side of the pulpit with considerable force. While flinging the Bible, she exclaimed, "It's a lie, Mr. Black, it's a lie!" It is not known to what statement of the minister's she referred. The lady members of the choir showed considerable anxiety for their personal safety, the book being flung from a point in close proximity to the choir platform. The incident caused a great deal of commotion in the congregation. And that's from the Scotsman for the 24th of October, 1904. So, yeah. I wonder what it is she took exception to. I guess we'll never know. But she certainly attempted to make her point in a very public scene. So, I have another one. Scotsman again. It's the 11th of November, 1905 for this one. We'll see what it has. This article is entitled Prosecution under the Infant Life Protection Act. Before Sheriff Guy at the Edinburgh Sheriff Summary Court yesterday, John Burnett, railway porter, Station Road, Rosslyn, and his wife, Jane Burnett, pleaded guilty to an offence under the Infant Life Protection Act. It was set forth in the indictment that, having, between August 1904 and the 5th of October 1905, retained for hire or reward Andrew Campbell, aged 4 years, and Duncan Campbell, aged 2 years, and nursed them apart from their parents, they, on the 25th of May 1905, received another child, David Pow-Taylor, 10 months, and failed to notify the local authority of Lasswade within 48 hours. Also, with having, on the 29th of September, received 2 other children, Henry Wilson, aged 2 years, and Anne Jane Wilson, 9 months, without notifying the authority. For the prosecution, it was stated that the house consisted of 2 apartments, in which there were 4 beds, and there were 7 children, all under the age mentioned in the Act in the house, and also the 2 accused and a married woman with her 2 children. Between the 9th of September and October, there were 12 persons in the house. Mr. D. Murray, solicitor, said the accused were not aware of the terms of the Act of Parliament, and it was only a technical breach. He had been told by the parochial and medical authorities that the children were well fed and looked after. Sheriff Guy agreed that the case was not more than a technical breach and imposed a nominal penalty of 10 shillings or 6 days imprisonment on each. And that's from the Scotsman for the 11th of November 1905. Now, it might seem like these people were just collecting children. And where were these children coming from? Baby farms were a big thing in the Victorian era. So if a woman couldn't afford to hire help to look after her child or had no family to look after her child while she went to work, then she would use a baby farm, which acted as a kind of day nursery for children. Another option is that if a woman were left with a child and the father of the child has absconded and left no money or way of supporting the child, and she herself is unable to support the child, then for a nominal sum of money, that child could be taken off her by a baby farm who would raise the child with a view to seeing it adopted or fostered, which was the idea of the thing. But baby farms were not good places in the main. They were linked to a lot of infant mortality, both accidental and on purpose. Sometimes someone would set up their home as a baby farm and would accept the money for the child and then do away with the child, thereby not having to expend any money on the child. They would just do away with the child and keep the money and maybe fob off any future inquiries about the child, maybe just saying, oh no, that child was adopted out, or what have you. So, yeah, baby farms. I mean, that's like a whole topic in itself. James Greenwood, one of my favourite authors from Victorian London, he was an investigative journalist, and he would actually go to these places pretending like he had a child that was going to need a situation in order to investigate these kind of places, the layout and what kind of accommodation children might expect there. So, yeah, it's a whole interesting part of Victorian life. We'll have one more, I think, for this one. Short and happy. Let's hope for short and happy, shall we? What's this one? The Dundee Evening Telegraph for the 3rd of October 1901. Let's see what the Dundee Evening Telegraph has. This one's a bit of a near miss. It's entitled, What Would Have Waked Him? A morning paper publishes news from Bessington describing a miraculous escape from death of a 2-year-old child. He had fallen fast asleep between the metals of the railway, 400 yards from the station of Gilly, and when a train approached at full speed, he slumbered on, completely unaware of his terrible danger. The driver of the engine saw the child and made desperate efforts to shut off steam and apply the brake, but he was too late, and the entire train passed over the sleeping boy. Everyone gave him up for dead, but when the horrified passengers ran to his rescue, they found him still fast asleep and absolutely unconscious of the danger through which he had so miraculously passed unscathed. And that's from the Dundee Evening Telegraph for the 3rd of October, 1901. And the only question I have off the back of that article is, where were the parents? How does a 2-year-old child end up asleep on railway sleepers in the middle of a line? That seems very strange. Now we know that childcare was an issue. Not everyone could afford it. And we have heard of children being taken to work with varying members of railway staff. And that may very well be the case here. Maybe he was taken to work with somebody. Maybe his father worked in the station of Gilly. I don't know, because it doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us or give us any hints at all as to how that child ended up on the railway line. So, that's a real mystery. But a hell of a lucky break for that child to have not been killed by the train, to have fell asleep in such a way and in such a place that the oncoming train just went straight over him. But what a fright for the driver, oh my words. He's going to have just assumed for several minutes that he's been the cause of that infant's death. So the relief, I think he'd have gone for a drink straight after, just out of sheer relief. So that ends on a rather positive yet mysterious note, this episode, I guess. And we may see you next time.